Welcome to this talk about feminist cinema today and tomorrow, and about the films of our three guests. We have three filmmakers today with us, who are all three part of the program of the International Film Festival Mannheim-Heidelberg, and all three are here with their first feature films. I'm very happy to welcome Diana Montenegro García from Colombia, and Sol Berruezo Pichon-Rivière from Argentina, and Dea Kulumbegashvili from Georgia. Welcome. I think you can switch on your microphones. We can. I'm very happy that you're here with your films in this virtual space that we call a festival right now. And I'm happy that you take the time to talk with us and with the audience about your films. I'd like to, in this time we have together, I'd like to find out what for you is feminist cinema and what you would like it to be, and of course find out more about your personal work. So I was thinking we could start with Diana Montenegro García. And Diana, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your project. I think it's very interesting to find out a little bit about your work and about the ideas you connect with the film you made. Maybe for the audience who don't know you yet, I'll just tell very briefly something about you, and I'm happy if you can add something. You were born in Colombia and you studied in Colombia at the University of Valle in Cali, and you've been working with documentary formats, and this is your first feature film, and I think that's quite an interesting and important fact to know about your work, that the documentary side inspires also your work in fiction. Maybe.
Yeah, well, when I started studying, yeah.
Sorry. I had a little. I didn't hear you right away.
Okay. I think that when I made my first short film during university, it was actually a fiction film, but it has like a background with the reality itself, because I think that at the end, cinema, its DNA is documentary, and I think that's why I started studying mainly documentary, and somehow I tried to transfer that to the fiction field of my films. And somehow I started to discover that I don't know, despite the fact that I grew up in an only women family, that brings me to a path where all my films starts to build kind of a portrait of somehow like depict an idea of females living here in Colombia, from young, from elder, and especially in my film where the main character is a little girl, is like she's part of an only women family. So somehow at this point, this is my first film, but I start to, like look back through my previous works, and I realized that this topic of female bodies and this topic of female, like the main figure of films, because usually female here are sometimes portrayed like an object of desire. So because mainly like the films has been directed by men, so somehow I feel that we are part like of a new generation that is bringing more and more and more female directors. I'm not very comfortable with the labels ideas. So I think that we need to get to a point where cinema is considering by what it is, as a cinema, as an art, and not only because it's a female film or male film, because I think that is how I mean, for me, women has certainly a point of view that is very particular, and I noticed that in my colleagues' films, in Dea and Sol's films. I think that definitely sometimes like you can think like, what if a man has directed this particular scene? So I think that definitely the feminine point of view becomes more in that way. But I definitely think that we should try to make that boundaries like even shorter, like not say like females films and men films. Like definitely there are difference in the point of view, on the senses, on the emotions, and how we women, when we are directing, we take care of so many details, that I think that's the point that mark like a difference. But I think that we should get to a point where the cinema is considering as itself.
Already looking forward to a cinema where there's maybe no need for this even term of feminism. Yeah, your film is about a community in which women really support each other, and I think it's central to your film that it's a community that we're looking at through the perspective of a little girl who's in this relationship of these women who she looks up to, and who she through their stories she starts to understand what the world could be like. This is this sense of community. Is it something that you brought in from a humanistic perspective, or what's your take on the female community?
Yeah, I think that is one, like a strong point that we need to work on it. We still need to work on it, not only on cinema, but I think our daily lives. And I think that, as you mentioned, I wish we wouldn't have the need to talk about females on cinema, and how we can make the participation more equal. But it's a fact, so we definitely need to talk about it. And I think one of the inspirations for my film was actually that, how I grew up in a family where a lot of values and really like strange and patriarchal behaviors have been normalized. And I found that is not something like it is part of my life, or Colombia's, or Latin America. I think it's something that definitely is worldwide, and it's more than cinema. It's our daily lives. How are we related with each other, and how we are taking females places, not only in cinema, but I mean in the world. So first of all, I think that the idea of community is that we as females, we definitely need to, like bring our strengths together. Sometimes I feel that women, or at least my experience is that sometimes women, we can actually be cruel between each others. And so I think that we need to find that balance between supportive kind of partnerships, even more in cinema, and how we can, like create this and break these boundaries through what we do and through our stories. Because yeah, definitely, sadly, but it's still a topic that we need to put on the table, and we need to keep talking about it, definitely.
Sol, you're from Argentina, and you studied in Buenos Aires film, and you consider yourself, I think, also as a multidisciplinary artist in not only film but also in music. And your first feature, which is Mama Mom, which we're showing, had its premiere at the Berlinale. And funnily enough, it has some parallels with Jana's work, I think, in this, and with this idea of a community and of a great subjectivity of experiencing these moments of this community. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your idea of community and these women who are together, bound together.
Well, as Diana said, I also, like, she inspired herself in her environment and her relationships. Well, I have 3 younger sisters, and like I was always around women, and I like experienced myself all the stages of growing up as a girl, but also then saw it in my younger sisters. And in a way, this is what triggered the story to happen, to portray this getting older in different times of age, but particularly in this movie, the transition between childhood to teenagehood. And I felt like what Diana said about it's a different way of seeing things, another way of portraying women, not just women, but characters in general. I think that's something it's necessary, not just for women to include like female voices, but also all types of gender voices, and not just male, because our eyes have been taught to see in a way that now it's changing, because there's more space for other types of directors or creators. But historically, we have always seen art and like pieces of art seen through the eyes of male artists. And well, cinema is one of the newest types of art, because it only has like 100 years, a little bit more perhaps. And something I like about filmmaking, it's constant change. I think it's like in a constant change that you need to accept that fact. Either if not, you would like need to face with a lot of contradictions, not just because changes because of technology, but also like the way of narrating, telling. I think it's all the time changing, and I think I really appreciate filmmaking because of that. And I think it's an art that includes all types of arts as well. And that's something I found so interesting about cinema. And as Diana said as well, I don't believe in labels, but feminism, I think it's a transitional label, no? It's because we need a label for this change, that it eventually will disappear, hopefully. But yes, sometimes you need to label things, because that's the way human beings understand things, like putting them names, even if sometimes words don't exist for explaining things. And that's something also beautiful about images, and not telling the audience or the spectator what to watch, but just showing it, no, without words. But yes, returning to your initial question, well, with Diana, we are kind of like neighbors in countries. Even if Colombia and Argentina have lots of like similarities, they also have a lot of differences, but we still like have the same way of, the same like less participation of women in the industry in filmmaking. I mean, it's growing even more with the years. For example, my movie, I did it, like I made it just with women in the whole crew, because I thought I would achieve something more like closer to what I expected if I had female eyes put it in the creation itself. I think there's a gentle way I don't want to generalize, but I think we have a gentle way of like asking for things, for like directing. I don't believe in like being like rough and are like square-minded and not accepting other ideas. I think we as women like have something more gentle and more like, okay, we like a community. I wanted to create this like no egos, and try to like share and create in the same environment. I mean, it sounds like an ideal place, but at least I want to achieve that in what I do, in everything of what I do.
Yeah, I'd like to come back to the production side with all of you in a minute. But first, I'd like to introduce Dea, who comes from Lagodiki in Georgia, and you studied in Columbia University School of the Arts in New York, and you've made short films before. And this is your first feature film that was actually in the Cannes selection that was never a real film festival, but you were able to show your film actually in Cannes just a few weeks ago, and you had your premiere in Toronto and then in San Sebastian. Beginning, I mean, I don't want to stretch this too far, but there are some similarities, of course, as well in this reflection on what community means. But in this case, it's not a female community. It's a very much patriarchal community. And maybe you can jump in the conversation in talking about how you crafted this specific perspective on this community.
Well, just to also continue what Sol and Diana said, I think that what really matters in cinema, in my opinion, is that we all bring something of our own and our personal experiences to cinema or to any form of arts. And we as women, of course, we do bring not only our vision, but also our sensual or emotional experiences of how do we exist in the world and how do we live on the day-to-day basis. And maybe that's what's really important in questioning the narrative or so-called traditional narrative that it's presented in the more mainstream cinema. Because if we look outside of the mainstream cinema, for example, at the experimental cinema, or for example, at the documentary cinema, there were always maybe more women represented than in more mainstream, because it's, again, we go back to maybe question of economy and how much money is invested in making the films, and how does it all relate to allowing women to make films. And in this case, in case of my film, yes, it's a patriarchal society because this is how we live in Georgia. And for me, it was important to convey the experience of existing in this world or living in this world. And because what really matters in art, I think it's to capture the truth, or to at least try to capture the truth and the truthfulness of the experiences and the truthfulness of the moments. And the community, do you mean the religious community in case of my film? Or the community outside of the religion?
I was thinking of the religious community, and then, I mean, the community of this village.
I think religion in all of our countries, I think, is a big part of the social structure of the bigger, larger social structure. And questioning the structure of any institutionalized religion is very interesting for me, because strangely enough, it's always connected to the patriarchal structure, and the place of a woman is always somewhere in the background or next to a man. And I don't want to only focus and talk about only one religious group, but I really hope that the audience members will be able to look outside, because cinema, no matter how local and individual and personal it is, it only achieves its goal maybe if every member in the audience member finds something that resonates within us and looks out and looks into our own experiences. I guess we all, in a way, are dealing with the religion and religious structures in one way or another. And for me, it's also very interesting to really look at how women live in Georgia, because I also grew up in a family with many women, and no matter if they're professionally very successful and achieved a lot professionally, it always has been this sense of some kind of oppression, or maybe even inner censorship of how women exist and live in Georgia. And maybe that's, for me, it's even more interesting to question than just the external censorship or external oppression that comes towards women. but how do we function in these communities? Because this is how we grow up. This is how we learn to exist. And then when the question of what do we really want, or how do we really want to live, comes, like when we have this question, how do we react, or what are the steps that we make to go for something of which is our own?
We already have a first comment in our question and answers that relates to something that Sol just mentioned about the question of which kind of production and which kind of set you want to have. And the comment is from Sabrina: strong. Oh, now I can't see it anymore. Sorry. Strong egos that rub and argue bring inspiration. Competition and clear hierarchies are not bad. This reflects to this question of which kind of production environment do you want? Is this something you want to react to, Sol, or?
No, I thought Dea was about to spit it out, but you can go. You can go first if you want, Dea.
Because I liked what you said about hierarchies. And I think that it's not the competition and it's not the hierarchy that brings inspiration. For example, I don't want to be challenged by the people I work with. I want to be inspired, and inspiration does not come from contradictions necessarily. And even the discussion and the productive conversation doesn't mean that we need to compete. I don't necessarily agree with that like statement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's something in cinema that I think it's very important, that everybody needs to matter their own business in a way. But also, if people would only like focus on their task, then like the result would be like a collage, no? But a collage like not very like merged between arts. And I think at least what I need, it's an environment, like a really peaceful environment, in a way, like almost not feeling like there's a hierarchy, even if it exists. I try to be like more horizontal in a way, and not like too like this, because if not, we lose like the potential that every head involved in a movie has. Like I believe that making a movie is putting a lot of magical brains put together, and all of them giving their best and feeling that like they are like the final product, the final movie. I always talk as an ensemble, like it's our movie. It's not my movie or her movie or the producer movie. No, I believe it's a work of art, that it's a collective way of art, and that's what I like about cinema. And I don't like personally, because there are lots of directors. We have been taught in school that how directors were so hard on their actors or on their crew, but it's not my way, and it's not what works for me, either what works for my colleagues. So I prefer to have a more like feel safe in where I work, because I'm like opening myself, and we are all opening ourselves. So if you don't feel safe, you won't give your best. That's what I believe. For example, directors like Lars von Trier will tell you, no, you should like punch like the actor until the end. I don't know. Well, the work with actors, I think it's different. I think they like to be challenged, actors, and it's important for them to be challenged and to have limits, because if not, it's like a chaos and they don't really understand what they are doing. So it's part of directing, I think, putting limits, but also like perhaps putting like a safe word, like saying, hey, no, I don't want to go over there, or disregarding to actors, because director and actors, it's like a different relationship, as well as producer director, which for me is so important, this relationship. Having a producer that really represents how you see your work, how you see cinema. I think it's super important, first of all, to have somebody like next to you that it's really goes for what you believe. I think that's like the most important thing to figure out, like with who are you going to start this world, because in a way you're starting a world that doesn't exist and you're building it part by part. And then, well, like all the people that come after, it's magic how they merge together. And I think, well, my way, and yes, what does me better, it's to have this peaceful environment and more collaborative and not hierarchy.
Well, here we still have a challenging environment, I must say. Sometimes female directors are forced to prove themselves to the others, and especially when it's male crew. So sadly, sometimes I'm not saying it's the best way, because actually I believe, like as you both mentioned, that this is like an horizontal relationship with your crew, because finally at the end we are supposed to be enjoying what we are doing. You know, cinema is our life, so this is not supposed to be doesn't mean suffering or struggling or fighting between each other. But sadly here we still have this challenging environment when you can see the difference when there's a female director, and you can see the difference when it's a male director. With a female director, despite her career, despite her qualities, despite even the production she has behind the funds and blah, 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 the co-production she has already of people who strongly believe on the project, sometimes there is people that demands her to prove that she knows how to do it. And I think that definitely that is something that lays more in how professionally, how professional we are when we are doing our craft. It doesn't matter if we are men or we are women, how professional we are on this. And it's ironical because at the end, I work with a lot of men in crew and also in post-production, and you can't imagine how wonderful it was to have their input on this, like a strong and female portrait of a women community. And for me, that was a really, really, really special, like path I had with this film, because I somehow found the balance between the strong idea of the feminine portrait and the female, and somehow this kind of, because I think that in my film there's a sense of justice that was behind of me in my personal story, but also in the social thing that is still going on with violence against women. So somehow the sense of justice that I have behind, I didn't try to change the world with my film, obviously, and I think no film can do that. But I had that sense of inspiration. And I found that these male companions, they were so professional, but all the time they were bringing me their input, and somehow I feel that connection creates like the perfect balance in the case of my film. So sadly, yes, we still have challenging environment for female directors. We recently have a scandal for abuse in filmmaking crew. So I think these kind of topics are still going on, sadly. And even though when women are trying to do their work, there are sometimes people that is not professional and they are trying to abuse even when you are in a creative environment. So sadly, we still here. We actually have a strong group here in Colombia that is called Rec Sisters. And we are, especially this year, through the Colombian Fund and Colombian film institutions, we are creating some protocols of behavioral protocols during the shooting of our projects, because that is something that sadly part of the challenging environment.
Dea, can you relate to what Diana says about the environment and to the relationship with the crew?
Well, I think that as the first feature director, there is a lot of that in general happening, that maybe the team or some people in a team demand that you prove something, and especially when you're a woman and if you're younger, then like that's like, I think that's unfortunately a universal experience we all go through. And I honestly and genuinely think that that is very just very bad and counterproductive for the film, because I personally don't want to prove anything, and it's not about my ego. I want to do my best for the film. That's it. And I don't want to engage into the relationship where I need to prove myself with anyone, because that takes so much away from the film. And with my team or with my crew, I just have one point of view, that if someone does not like to work with a female director, I think they should not. I mean, they should not do what they don't want to do, because I'm a woman and that's just what it is. And like, and I really hope that some people, maybe they initially, because Georgia, it's not an easy environment for female directors in Georgia. And maybe for some people, even in my crew, initially it was not easy to accept that I'm a woman and I make films. But I really hope that by the end of the production, something changed in their point of view, and then there will be another woman making the film, and something might be a bit easier for her, and she might be able to direct her energy and her concentration and focus on something more productive, rather than just dealing with the issues of why you as a woman are making a film, or who gave you rights to do so. It's
Did you ever think about doing what Sol did, to work with an all-female crew?
Me personally, no. Actually, I know that there is this. There are women directors who do that, and Chantal Ackerman was, for example, also doing that. But in my case, I really try to just work with everyone who wants to work on my film and who wants to work with me and who I want to work with, because I do genuinely believe that all experiences are equally necessary, and I want to have also men point of view on certain things. What I just think is that achieving the best for the film, for me at least, requires to actually do our best for the film, and not like on my set or and I did work with many amazing professionals who are men. Or I do believe that we just really need to open up the discussion, and maybe we also need to include more men into this discussion. Maybe we need to really talk. We need to really engage the dialogue with.
For sure, if we talk about feminism, it's not something that is, I mean, it's actually quite a confusing and complicated topic. When we did our selection, and we finished doing our selection, and we noticed that there is a thread going through the program with a lot of not only female voices, but actually voices of filmmakers relating to feminist issues. And we wrote this down. We had a lot of questions came to us. What does this even mean? What does it mean that there is a feminist thread going through your program? Is it something? Was there a quota for this, or how did it come to be? And it's quite a difficult question to answer, because there's no quota, and at the same time, I don't think it's a coincidence either. We talked about this briefly before, that things happen for reasons, and that the fact that this year there is a lot of female voices in the festival cinema, and that there were a lot of works from women that we wanted to show, also has of course, something to do with our sensibilities, but also I think with the times we are in. It doesn't mean that it is restrained to only women who can work towards feminism. I mean, I would hope so, at least.
Yeah, and I as I mentioned at the beginning, sorry to be persistent with this, but sometimes we women are sometimes really cruel between each other. We are very critical between each other, and I think that is also one part that we need to also work on it. And as Dea said, I think it's definitely important how we portrayed women, as Sol mentions, but also how we portray males and all genders in our films. Because at the end, we are all humans, and we are supposed to be connected through something some things that are behind that. So we should try to get to that point. But at the same time, what I found that is actually a thread like between our films is how the female community or the female figure is portrayed, but also how the male presence is absent or is portrayed like a violent figure, and how at some point we have this sense of justice is not on our side, and justice is yet to come on some topics. And I don't mean only like in cinema, I mean socially. As I mentioned you on our previous Q&A, in Colombia we had like tons of homicides, of murders of women during the pandemic, and most of them has been by their sentimental partners, like their husband. So when I think of Dea's film, I think that despite the geographical distance, that is a situation that we have here. I don't know, it's very common. And even when women are decided to make like, I don't know, to go to the police, because there are actually laws that protect women in these certain of cases, but they actually never work. So I feel that definitely like that is one topic that for me is important, how we at the end as female directors portray women, but also like the other side of the coin, let's say that.
There's a comment, there are actually two, but I'll take one first because it relates to what we were talking just now, is the comment by Sabrina that she thinks it is not good at all to choose films because there is a woman's name behind the director as a director. It should be selected solely on the artistic and content strengths of the works.
Well, I do believe that that's how our films were selected, no? For the festival.
No, of course. That's what. But I think it's an interesting question about what on which criteria are works actually selected. I'm not so much talking about our selection, where I can tell you that it's not from a perspective of quotas and selecting films because they're from women, but there are much more different criteria going in. But I wouldn't think that in general the selection works from purely artistic, completely free criteria. I think this idea of quality that is not biased in any way is part of the problem, actually. That there is an idea of this is art and this is how it should be, and it's linked to many stereotypes of what we associate with what men do.
Can I comment on this?
Please.
Because I find it really interesting that Sol and Diana, and because I also keep thinking about it, that why there is so many conversations now that okay, labeling cinema as feminist or talking about point of view or the vision as the feminist, maybe like we women started to talk that maybe we need to look outside or beyond. Because one of the issues is that, that with more and more, for example, I personally get comments like, okay, you get with your film into the festival, of course, because you're a woman. Because now it became almost like another side of a coin, as if like all of a sudden being a female director became, in eyes of some people, became easier, like you come from the easier background for some, one way or another. So there is all this like, I think that's why discussion and really engaging in a discussion is necessary, because, and I really think that we need to really talk about experience and the backgrounds of each director and where do we come from. Because one thing we really cannot say is that a female director from Colombia or Argentina or like Georgia, that we come from the easy or the fair backgrounds. We do come from our experiences, even though I do believe that it's difficult for everyone to make a first feature. And it's making films is challenging just because it's a nature of the job. And but we're also women, and it maybe adds some extra challenge. But I still believe that it's important to talk about the feminist point of view and the feminism in cinema, despite all these discussions going on and the diversion from the discussions. It's still important to talk about feminism.
Do you want to add something to it? Sol or Diana?
Yeah, I think, yes, that's a discussion that it's always coming in. Like now it's more trendy to pick up a female director, or I mean, I believe we are inside a historical moment that we cannot really see how it's going to end. Neither we can really like discuss it with like coming. I don't know how to say it in English. Wait a second, I will translate it. Objetividad, with objectivity.
Back. Yeah.
Like thank you, Diana. So I understand we are in this situation, but as Dea said, I also believe like we are here, and I wouldn't like to be chosen just because of my gender, not at all. But I do believe there's a change. There's something happening that to me it's. I mean, if it's trendy, okay, leave it that it's trendy. But let's have more female voices. Like also with like all manifestations and all movements. Like for example, in Argentina, legal abortion. It became like really popular to here. It's not legal yet, abortion. So here it became like really popular to see like people manifesting about it, and it has been like voices around saying, oh, now that it's trendy, then everyone wants abortion to be legal. Okay, let's keep it that it's trendy if you want, but at least we are generating a change altogether, like for festivals to, well, for example, this year in San Sebastian, like the Horizontes Latinos, which is a section of Latin American films, had like almost all the films directed by women. But I think that compensates for all the past years where there have been any. Well, in the Oscars, I think no women ever won a prize, or like 3 were nominated in all the story of the Oscar awards background. But I don't know. I really, as Dea says, it's a discussion that it's present all the time, and that I believe we are still inside a change that we cannot really speak with this freedom. But I won't stop doing it, and I will always try to show what I do as a human being and not as a gender or whatever. And of course, this decision of having a whole team of women, it's an experience that I wanted to make because of the experiment. I really wanted to see how it was, no? Because I am a woman, and I do want to have a change on that. That's really based on my story and my gender. But as Dea said, we are telling from our experiences and our like we cannot talk about we can create characters that aren't us, but in the end, what we tell is something that was processed by our brain, and we cannot change that fact. So yes, I mean, for my next projects, I would love to have a mixed team, because this thing that happens with feminism also starts to happen with with masculinity, how it's showed, how it's portrayed, is it really portrayed by all of its sides or we only see male characters with like among the same dimensions, like not global. I think there are other things that that perhaps women can help to portray it in a more sensitive way in some aspects. I'm not saying in everything, always with a lot of being careful, because of course we don't have that body, we haven't gone through those experiences, but that's something like all artists must keep in mind. Like we are creating, and it's all in our brains, and then it comes to life, and you need to accept the fact that people will start incarnating, like giving life to these characters, and that's outside of your control, and that's also part of the beauty, to have like a mixed team, and not just all women or all male, or like mixed independently on their gender. But yes, I don't know.
I think what you're touching on is the question of post-feminism or intersectionality. I mean, the question of going beyond just the question of a gender, but of course of identities, of race, of class. I mean, things that maybe feminism can lead to. Is that something that's important in your thinking about what you can do in cinema? Dea or Tiana?
Yes, because I do think that it's a bit artificial what cinema has offered to us in its brief history that it has as an art, because I think it has so many manifestations, and there are artists who come with their own vision and something of their own and something of their personal, but then mainstream cinema, it did commercialize one point of view in a way, and it mostly just excluded everything which was not just one traditional narrative of more conservative societies of the Western cultures. And I think it's outdated. I mean, in my opinion, maybe we're falling behind as filmmakers. Maybe we're not as in touch with life around us as we need to be, because life itself is not like that anymore, and we need to look outside of this like certain point of view on life, and art. I think cinema really unites all of us in some way, and it gives us a chance to really connect. But mainstream cinema, in many ways, it just disconnects and excludes. So maybe that is the problem at the end.
I will repeat the question for Diana, because
sorry, and that's not just a gender issue. Like it's industry, money. So that's why I think we are also here, and like also fighting for these spaces to reach more people, because this type of cinema gives us more freedom in what we do. If not, we are really attached to somebody that's really vertical and that's really like deciding on, like in general, for example, the producer has the final cut. It's not usual for the director to have the final cut. No, and that's something I learned like not very far ago, and I found it like, whoa, my God, like I don't want to like lose it like that, even though perhaps I will have more money, more structure, but I don't like, I think one needs to like focus on what you really think it's important for your work. And it doesn't mean that industrial things are bad or independent are good. And no, it's just, I think you need to adapt to what the film needs, what your project needs. No?
Diana lost her connection for a minute early on, so I'd like to recap briefly. We were talking about what feminism can maybe lead to, the post-feminism or intersectionality, the questions of going beyond just gender, but also going to questions of race, of class, of background, of identity, sexual identity, etc., and how this can matter, and if feminism, and in which way feminism can lead to that. I'd like to include one question that was just brought up in the chat by Michael Haus. The change you make, doesn't it stay within a circle of people that are interested in those topics you cover anyway? How do you think a broader circle of people could be addressed?
Yeah, as we were talking, like we still need to struggle with those labels, because I mean, during the financial stage of my project, for example, I had an experience of a producer asking me, but who the hell will care of a film with female topics that is like so boring? Like, how do you think it could be sales, to sell to the world? And earlier when we were talking about challenging, those kind of things I found during the process were the kind of things that feed me, actually, but not with anger, but on the opposite side, as Dea said, like with the calm and with the certain that I should try to pursue what my creative view was intended to. So at some point, yes, I think that we still need to struggle with a lot of things. I think that somehow cinema is just getting in a way that it's becoming more aware of our environment, of social issues that are coming through. There was a moment of cinema, especially Latin American cinema, and it was a trend to make films of like ethnical portraits of what we call in Colombia like porn misery. We call it porn misery. Like I remember a very, very strong documentary director from Cali, Luis Ospina. He made a film that it's called in Spanish Agarrando Pueblo, which means catching people. And he was trying to make, and it's an old film, and he was trying to portray this trend that becomes more and more and more eager on the festivals, that Latin American cinema has to be like poor or indigenous, but portrayed like a silent, strange creatures of the other side of the world. And somehow I think that in that way, feminist cinema is bringing some different topics, some different perspective to world cinema. So definitely, I think that feminist cinema is also a part of something bigger that we need to build together. I remember from my experience during the screenwriting process, I choose Lucrecia Martel, which is an Argentinian director. And I choose her not because she was a female director. I choose her because she brought to cinema a very rich and complex perspective of what we as Latin Americans are as a community, but also we as humans can be sometimes like animals, like we can lead on a tedious life. So I think that in a way we can start building the cinema from that perspectives. We will try to struggle with those differences that we still have. So yes, I definitely think that this interlineal, sorry, my cat is, in a way we can, you know, like make those boundaries shorter. We definitely think that we can break those walls. And regarding the questions, yes, I think that definitely we still have this idea of, yeah, female topics or ethnical kind of topics. And I think that is not a problem only of us as creators. I think that's a problem of the market. As you mentioned, there is a like homogenic point of view, homogenic point of contents. You can swap, you can make zapping on Netflix, and you can lose yourself trying to find something different to watch. You can sometimes take film stills or series stills, and you will see that they are so similar. They actually use the same production schemes. They use the same cameras, the same lenses, and sometimes it's terrible when you hear that director that said, I want my film to look like True Detective. I want this particular kind of aesthetic. So definitely I think that it's a problem that we need to build this together. We as creators, no matter our gender, and we as the audience, how we start to pressure the platforms, how we start to pressure the festivals, how we start to pressure the distributors of, if we stop consuming those kind of homogenic content, then the market should start try to find those new voices that actually they are here. They are here. And sometimes I ask myself, did actually people take the time to watch the films? So I think for me, at the end, the main reflection is it's more like an invitation to you all, to the audience connected here, to watch the films. Because I think that at the end, films has that magic that if you are focused on that only, without your mobile, you get something. You get a sense of what the creator was trying to build when he or she creates the story. So we need to go back and we need to slow down a few revolutions, and we start to avoid those prejudgments on females topics or female cinemas, and try to be more open to conceive cinema as what it is, as an art, and we as an audience and we as creators.
Do you want to react to the characterizations of Diana about what mainstream and cinema is like, and yeah.
Just to continue on that, I think that maybe one of the most problematic parts of mainstream cinema, for me at least, is that when you're making a film as a director, you want to capture an authentic, true experience, or you want to go to places, you want to meet people, you want to go beyond some comfort zone, or you don't want to just bring an image that's familiar to everyone and is polished by the studios. Like, this is not what you're going for. You really want to go for something which is the life of this woman that, for example, you're making a film about. And once you go there, this is the magic of cinema. Once you physically go there with your team, Then you meet people, and then you talk to these people, and then suddenly there will be at least 2 or 3 or 5 people around you who will meet you in this place, who will want to maybe start thinking about making films, or start thinking about watching films in a different way. Maybe they go home and they think that, oh, maybe I need to check out this kind of cinema or that, and maybe I need to look for something more than just something which is catered to me by I don't know, television or whatever it is. It's also the human interaction, because it's life. I mean, it's not like we make films as just a profession and then we go back to life, right? It's our life. This is how we live as filmmakers. We make films and we live at the same time in those places, and we go through those experiences. And that's a very important part of filmmaking for me, that maybe there are things that are not necessarily on screen, but are part of the process, and they're equally meaningful also than just what's on the screen.
There was actually a question earlier in the chat that I didn't come to yet, because it wasn't in the area what we were talking about, but it relates to what Dea was just saying. It's a question to Diana about how much biography of you is in the film. We touched on this briefly in our Q&A, and I think this relationship to what your life is and what is seen on screen is interesting to hear about.
Well, actually, there is a lot of biographical. I think that at the end of the film, you get that feeling that somehow, like, I portrayed like how I grew up, but and some point that I tried to build during the film was trying to be like anachronic. So this is not like pastime film. So I felt that despite it has like a strong connection with my childhood, I tried to build something that is not out to date. So that's one point that for me was important. And on the other hand, I think that at the end, despite the fact that it has biographical like background, it definitely has a strong point in how this portrait of being a woman in Colombia, and I think Latin America, and I think the world ends in the film. So somehow I feel that also it becomes like a cultural depiction of how those behaviors have been part of not only of my childhood, but also how they are how they still prevail. So at the end, I feel that the biographical side of the story gets connection with those other layers that are part of the story, and somehow it's like an invitation to go like very deep to this house. That is how I try to create, like, you as an audience can be part of this family for this hour and a half, but without the sense of judging properly, but at the same time, like, being part of their intimacy. So at the end, the biographical stays like aside, and I start trying to like travel around their bodies, the femininity itself, how we women can relate each other, and I think that also, well, culturally, that's the kind of family I grew up. So I think that what nowadays with the excess of images, that's the kind of things that make sometimes films particular, when you're not trying to make like mainstream topics, but when you're trying to attach to what from your inner you feel that can be connected with the audience somehow. So I think that at the end it's an invitation to connect through these women, through their feelings and fear, and from the point of view of Camila, which is like a little girl.
And for those who are wondering about the noise in behind Diana, there's a general strike going on, isn't there?
And it's also storm coming on. So I think it's like, apocalyptical. You know, in my film, there is also a lot of like superstitious and this religious thing that Dea mentioned that is part of our culture as well. So I think that background matches like very well with my cursed film and my cursed family and as well. Yeah.
It's too many women talking about cinema, so you know, nature started to participate.
So is the category of the biographical or of the personal experience something that's important to you?
Yes, I think as we said, first of all, the stories come out from your own experiences, like transform, of course, and put into fiction, but we work with our experiences. That's like our materia prima, like our basis, no? And then we do our crafts with our basis, which is our experiences, and we transform them so we can create other worlds and perhaps telling them with more freedom that perhaps telling our own things. So my movie, it's a fiction. It's not based in anything that happened to me, but yes, this dynamic between the girls, I did experience it, and I wanted to replicate it in a way with different characters, different situations. But I wanted to give characters and bodies to these experiences I had. So yes, it's partly fiction and partly based on my experiences. And I wanted to thank to the person that it's like making like a summary of everything we are saying in the chat. It's so good. Like you're putting it into words so good, and wow, thank you.
Thank you, Felix. He's in the background helping us to keep track of what happened, and for all those who come in later. I wanted to touch on one or one and a half more topics. The one is about tradition and the question of what came before you, and the second half of this question would be about what you hope for what comes after you or with you in the future. Where do you look back to, and where do you look forward to with your idea of what cinema can be like? It's an open invitation to any of you.
Yeah. Yes, I think we took our background experiences, like as we were talking, like we all took something from our past or from our culture, and we filtered it by our eyes and tried to show it in another way. Because I think in a way, as Dea said, film, it's about finding the truth, or not the truth, but at least posing the good questions, like giving good questions without answers, but trying to settle like other questions, trying to show things in a different way. So like the audience doesn't need to necessarily be a woman to understand what he is seeing. But I like this thing of a work of art transforming something and filtering it by the author's eyes. So in a way, we are all using reality as a basis. We are all using things that are around all of us, but we are taking it and like placing it in another like perspective. I think that's like our job in a way, like to reformulate, also to give it like another cook to what it's already, what we have been taught already, but like give it another try, another cook, another round of thoughts, so we can generate a new truth, because truth are all the time as well changing. And fortunately, I mean, we do have our things we need, like our pilares, like our things that keep us centered. But I think it's all about all the time questioning everything we learn, even our language. Yes, but
I think engaging in each other's work and engaging the dialogue is extremely important for me. Maybe because I come from the culture where any work of art is unquestionable. It just stands on the pedestal and just has its own function, which is not untouchable. There is some kind of sense of protest in me. I want to engage, and I can't just stand aside. And I think that's important, like to question, to engage, because otherwise any work of art just becomes just distant, and it gains the function which is not the function of art anymore. It gains the function which is more symbolic. And I really hope that bringing the medium forward, or at least challenging the medium and questioning what cinema is or what can cinema do, is again, like, the questions are very important. And in any form, to question the form or the narratives, and of course, like, what is the human experiences.
Yeah, I think that we are now in a difficult moment. Sorry for being so pessimist, sorry. But I feel that somehow we are like in the middle of a sandwich. I feel like we are part of a generation that grew with cultural behaviors that we are trying to break somehow, because we finally get to understand that not all of them should be part of our daily lives. So that's one thing in our lives. And in cinema, I think that during the academy, the university, blah, blah, we have the references of a cinema that is no longer exists, but it keeps alive in ourselves, like Tarkovsky, like Bergman, like the big reference we have from cinema. So when you ask us about our past, if I look to my past, I look myself at the university, like learning cinema through those masters. But the present is different with the, I should say it again, with the VOD platforms and blah, 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 with this kind of homogenic contents. So the future doesn't seem like very encouraging, because what I see the future is more and more individual kind of living, more and more individual kind of consuming, even the arts. So the future of cinema, and I also, for example, here in Colombia with the pandemic, the film theaters, they didn't even make an effort. You know, they are not like caring about will we open. They say like 2 months in advance, before the end of this year, they say we will not open any cinema. So, and it's not because, and they didn't even care about the life of cinema itself, because actually author cinema is not being presented in these kind of theaters. So for me, the future brings to me like a huge concern of how us as creators can make that path and those boundaries like shorter, and to make people to make the audience connect again through what we are, like humans, as Dea mentions. So for me, it's a difficult and challenging times. I think that we are in a middle of changes. If you look at media in general, if you look at Instagram or social networks, you will see what kind of women are part of the front pages, what kind of content is I mean, you post your trailer, you post your an award notice in social media, blah blah blah, and you don't get never the same coverage that gets someone that is doing stupid things, with YouTubers and blah blah blah, and somehow you start questioning what is wrong with us. Like nowadays, it's not only a responsibility for us as creators. I think that we all have the responsibility of how the future of cinema and the art as art itself is going to be, because we can keep doing our best. We can keep doing what Sol mentions. We can keep aware of our environment and reality and trying to filter that through our point of view and our art, our craft, our cinema. But at the end, I think that we are now in a very difficult moment. It can definitely, we can still get, like the control, and we can somehow get a different direction. But yeah, I think that we just are in the middle of, and I think it's almost the same for music. When it's going to be again like a Mozart in the world. So I think that is a bigger issue that is not only a responsibility, but we are trying to do our best from our craft and for the way we're bringing these point of views, and as Sol and Dea mentions, like trying to point out the right questions, or questions that somehow shake the audience in some ways. But we think that definitely this is a work we need to do, like together.
Can I add just a little thing? Do we have time?
Sure.
I think it's really interesting to talk about new media or the digital media in this way, because I think that ways of perception or the ways that we're looking is changing. And we cannot avoid it. It has always been a part of how humans develop through the history. I think what's really, like when we talk about engagement of the audience or the viewer, maybe sometimes to really, really test the patience of the viewer. Because connection does not necessarily mean that to connect with the narrative or to connect with the story that will shake us. But cinema, first of all, is the audio and the visual experience. And I think it's very interesting to constantly think about it for when you're a director, but also to look out at everything else, like how other audiovisual material or all the images, how does everything around us really function? And maybe that's what I was trying to say, that maybe cinema does not want to look at the contemporary society and what's really happening around us, and how do we look at things and how do we perceive things. And that's important. I think it's not only audience that needs to care about cinema, but maybe cinema in a way also needs to engage and open up. And maybe nowadays, because mainstream cinema is so conservative, maybe there is, for me at least, that's one of the main problems in this puzzle of different problems that Ariana was talking about.
So how will you engage with it? How will you find ways to engage with the world? Oh, all three of you.
Well, I think we spoke about it briefly when we were doing Q&A, that I think that questioning the audience and constantly really, audience is not just this dark cinema and some people with no faces and no names, right? It's actually individuals sitting in the theater. And for me, it's extremely important to think that I want the audience to be active. And it's not, because I am honest when I say that when I watch some big blockbuster or the action film, I do fall asleep because my attention span, I'm not the best viewer in that way. Like when I am catered everything and like everything is true that just given to me in film, I just disengage. I need to be involved. I need my mind and to be stimulated, or at least the magic of cinema to keep me involved. And when the film ends and I go home, I want to continue to think about it. That's an engagement. I want to get angry, for example, or I want to have emotional response to a film, and that does not only happen with the story or with the plot. And maybe today we're dealing with economy, which is extremely difficult because of maybe this big I don't know how to say, like platforms or the studios that are producing more and more art house cinema as well, which also define the form, because we need to talk about that as well, because those studios and those platforms have requirements for the form as well, of how the films can be seen digitally online on the small screens. And that changes a lot, and I think it is a huge problem.
So what do you think about where you can be headed, and which ways you want to engage?
It's something that I always think about. I think it's very important to leave space for new authors, new filmmakers to enter the game. I think that's very important because like new generations always start bringing new information that we don't know where it comes from, but in a way it's like every generation brings an additional wisdom to society, I think. And to me, I started by portraying like little girls and like a new generation. I like having, for example, actors which are young, because they show us something new. And I think, well, for instance, yes, that's a main point. Another one, it's something that has been a consequence of the pandemic, which has been the online platforms and how this allowed other types of audience to engage and to have the possibility of watching these films, because film festivals usually happen like during the year, during like Labor Days, perhaps in a small town in the middle of a country. And yes, for us, it's so like it's an amazing experience, but this also prevents perhaps people from outside the film world to access these films and like staying home watching Netflix, which is easier, cheaper. And so I think this also happened with music, like how music used to be sold like a CD. You used to buy the CD, bring it home, listen to it. Now this physical thing has disappeared, and it has all entered like a wide thing, which is Spotify, internet, which also help like more people to make music and to express themselves. I mean, it all has like a pro and a contra, like a flaw and an advantage. I don't want like film festivals as a physical stage and moment to disappear, because I think it's a crucial and super important space of communicating and getting people together. But at the same time, I also believe that this pandemic has shown us how other types of visualization of things has like perhaps reach more people, which I think it must be like our main goal, no? To reach more people, more people to see these stories, these different things, because it's a matter of training the eye to see different things, different rhythms, different colors, different characters. It's a matter of training the eye, I think, because sometimes it happens to me as well. Like when I'm tired at home, perhaps I just want to watch a horror film, like a bad one, and because I know it won't be a problem to me. But it's not because of that. It's not because of the content just, but also because I'm more used to see things like this, so I already process them in another way. But if you see cinema and how it has changed, like from the montage, from the camera, like I think it's growing even more to give it like another to achieve different rhythms, different things. And but well, what I wanted to say, perhaps it's linked to the pandemic, that is this thing that how I think other types of audiences have reached these places, which sometimes remain like an intellectual thing, which not everybody wants to get in, no? And that's also a myth we need to drop down. Perhaps that's what I can say right now, because as we said with the other topic, it's something we are like inside this transformation, so we can talk with what we can talk, but we are still figuring out every day, I think. But I think it's one of the main concerns of us filmmakers should be this, like how to engage other audiences, how we should shift, how we should consider other ways of showing our films. I don't know, it's all in a discussion and in constant transformation. I think that's something the pandemic has showed us, how everything is constantly changing and transforming and adapting.
Which can be a good thing. Diana, with your apocalyptic background, do you want to share a last message of hope to close this talk?
Okay, I will throw in some fire. But in my very brief experience with other colleagues here in Colombia, I mean, there is a huge questions. I think that one of the main points here is access. As you both mentioned, we as creators, we will try even more to get that engaged with the audience in somehow, despite if it's not only to be gentle with them, and I think that's positive. But on the other hand, I think that's a matter of access. We can't control that. That is the end of the chain, like the distribution and the action. And for me, yeah, as Sol mentioned, like the pandemic brought to us these kind of spaces that we wouldn't have perhaps physically. So I think that's positive, and that show us that it's a matter of access to the audience, how the audience can have access to these particular kind of contents. And that brings me to the other idea that sometimes, haven't you asked yourself as creators why these kind of films, you can watch them sometimes like in a illegal way, you know, like for the pirates, from piracy. So here the consumption of author cinema is not in the main theaters, it's not in Netflix, it's not in the regular chain of exhibition, but despite its piracy. And I think that is something that brought us like another concerns, because at some point we have here, for example, two experiences of filmmakers that take their films to the pirates, a very good quality copy, and they brought themselves, like, if you're going to sell my film, just do it right. I want people to catch my eye and my art in the best way possible. And somehow the film gets this crazy thing. And I tried that with my first short film. I put it on YouTube like a lot of time ago. and I get like 5 million engagement people there. They start dating under my video because at that time Tinder doesn't exist. So my film was about a love story between two high school girls, and people start dating. Like, hey, I want to meet someone also. I'm lesbian too. This is my number. This is my contact address. So if we talk about engagement with the audience, I think that the content is ready. I think that all of our film, especially all of 3 films we have here in this discussion, we can certainly have a lot of points to connect with the audience. I think that the next step is access. How those films can reach the audience in a not so hard way and in a legal way as well. But yeah, for example, sadly here, the consumption of this kind of author cinema is still in hands of piracy. So what are we doing in that last step of the chain that is not allowing us to bring these kind of topics to the audience? Because I think that we shouldn't underestimate the audience. They are able and capable to see hard to see films, complex films, intellectual kind of films. You want to label them like that. They are able to, because as Dea mentioned earlier, is audiovisual art. So people is able to connect with even the more complex films. They get something from them. So I think it's a matter of access, and definitely we have internet. We are more connected than few years ago. So definitely we should try to take advantage of it and try to bring our films somehow to the audience, to different paths, to get that engagement somehow.
Well, thank you for this nice final note. For those in Germany, of course, you have access to the films on our platform. You can still watch them until Sunday, and you can check out the films of Dea, Diana, and Sol. And I think we will paste some links to the films in the chat. Check them out if you can. And I want to thank you very much for having been with us, for being with us with your films, and for discussing with us. And I'm sure the discussion will continue on. Goodbye.
Yeah, thanks very much. Bye.